Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News for this Saturday, the 29th day of June, 2024. Now, our top story is going to revolve around what we've been warning about with the obvious decline of President Joe Biden. Namely, it opens the door for evil countries to see a limited opportunity for some type of adventurism. There was an editorial that one of the Israeli periodicals called HaYom, meaning the day in Hebrew, that did today. And it was interesting because this is their topic, and we're going to look into that in a little bit more detail as they brought up some things that are really necessary for us to consider. So we'll look at that. Now, we also have Israel's response for a story we talked about earlier today, namely Iran's threat that if a major war breaks out in Lebanon with Hezbollah, they will wipe out Israel. And we'll deal with that, what Israel had to say about that. Then, of course, we have two stories about Russia and their long-term involvement with Ukraine and why the Ezekiel 38-39 war is not on the near horizon. That's important for us to understand what the scripture says and what we should expect to see. All right, let's go to the stories. Headline number one: Biden's decline gives the Middle East's axis of evil a golden opportunity against America and Israel. And again, this is from the Israeli periodical HaYom. Global implications mount as questions swirl around the presumptive Democratic nominee's fitness for office. In a world rife with aggressive forces, the unflattering image of an American president, the leader of the free world, appearing weak and incoherent, encourages evildoers. Now, we couldn't agree with that more, and this is what we've been saying. When you see, a president that just doesn't have it all together, and let's face it, perception is reality, and they're going to think, wow, we've got an opportunity now, a window of doing things we couldn't normally do with a president that's in control. And so this is kind of the opening paragraph of this opinion piece from HaYom. Throughout Joe Biden's presidency, there have been persistent claims that he is being managed by a group of advisors and Democratic leaders who not only support him, but potentially steer his policies. The frequent calls from former President Barack Obama to the White House have fueled this perception, suggesting that Biden's tenure is effectively Obama's third term, albeit a far more radical one, and that's the key. Now, in light of the incumbent president's recent on-air stumble, that's a really gracious way of putting it, it seems the proverbial smoking gun has been found. The president is functioning at a subpar level, while an extreme progressive group led by Secretary of State Antony Blinken is driving U.S. foreign policy. Now, that's a very important point. We've made that not the way this editorial made it. I really like the way they said it, because Biden basically is functioning at a subpar level. It's his surrogates that are driving foreign policy. And Blinken is quite the radical leftist here. He's quite the woke, Secretary of State. So basically what we see is driving the foreign policy with he and these other progressives. Okay, none of the issues concerning American citizens and those of other nations such as Israel and Ukraine are being adequately addressed or resolved. Isn't that the truth? They're just throwing money after money after money in the whole Ukraine situation. And as we've said, it's incoherent, their foreign policy with respect to Israel, whether it's for Israel, one day he is, one day he's against them. There's no continuity there. Now, the article goes on, in a world rife with aggressive forces, the unflattering image of an American president, the leader of the free world, appearing weak and incoherent, encourages them to exploit opportunities. Biden's decline mirrors the collapse of his Middle East policy vis-a-vis Iran and its proxies, as well as the incomprehensible crisis at the southern border with Mexico. This porous region is drawing millions of migrants of all types into the United States, including criminal and terrorist elements. And that is one of the things we've talked about. We worry about who comes across and no one knows who they are, where are they, and how many cell groups do we have just waiting for the time, like we just saw in Russia when they took advantage of a day against churches and synagogues there and did these terrorist activities. We have similar things here, groups in the United States. We just don't know where they are, who they are, how many of them there are. So the article goes on. Now, in light of the incumbent president's recent on-air stumble, it seems the proverbial smoking gun has been found. Again, we just emphasize that. And so it has been found. There's no question about it. Now, here's the problem. Biden has lost a great deal, according to veteran news commentator Brett Baer's simple summary of what we saw on Thursday night. In other words, he lost a great deal right then, because this was supposed to be his opportunity to show the world he wasn't that bad off, as certain people have been saying recently, that the so-called gaffes were not really gaffes, and that he's actually doing really well. Again, just the opposite was seen, obviously. And so, will he be the Democratic presidential nominee? It's that question is still up in the air, as we talked about earlier today. Nikki Haley repeatedly said that he won't be. Speculations about, if not him, then who? Now, the situation has deteriorated, as we've mentioned, also to the point that New York Times liberal columnist Thomas Friedman is pleading with Biden to step aside, as the New York Times did in an editorial yesterday, as different political leaders are saying this. So this situation has really deteriorated. And so Biden, we are told from those who know him, is a self-confident person. He is arrogant, too stubborn to entertain the thought of withdrawing from the race. He justified his failure the other night with Trump, and he said his failure in the debate was because he had to contend with a liar and constant lies. And as this article says, leaders are expected to deal with other leaders who are far worse than liars, namely mass murderers, for instance. Now, there was a point where it seemed that former President Obama and his allies in the foreign relations establishment and the party were comfortable having a president who was weak in many respects in the White House. The situation invites evasion and responsibility. Every mishap is filed away as an event that Biden can't be expected to handle. Conversely, those responsible for strategic blunders are not called into account. Now, the problem is that, and here we are, we've got no candidate, though, that can motivate from the Democrat side, the voters to turn out in mass and vote for them. Not Biden himself, not Kamala Harris, not Governor Gavin Newsom, nobody. Michelle Obama, it seems too late for her to jump into the boiling political cauldron. Okay, in other words, the situation from what Biden showed the world on Thursday night is really dicey because we don't know who will see that as something they can take advantage of in the short term. And here's our takeaway from this. There's a short window of time here. If it becomes obvious that Trump will defeat Biden or whoever the Democrats run, then Iran and its surrogates must act fast while they can. Once Trump takes office, then their adventurism will be kept at a minimum, and that's the understatement. This would bring an end of the major fighting between Israel and the Iranian surrogates at the present time, and only time will tell what's going to happen. So there is the worry, like we said, in the short term of something happening, possible with Hezbollah, using these advanced rockets that they have, advanced missiles. Remember, we talked about this, that could hit anywhere in Israel that they haven't used yet. They have some tremendous weapons there, and so does Israel. And it's going to be a horrible regional war if this what breaks out. All right, which brings us to our second and third headline here. Second headline. Israeli Defense Minister Gallant on Hezbollah. We're not looking for a war, but we're ready for it. So he says Israel prefers a diplomatic solution to Hezbollah threat on the northern border. Now, as Israel begins wrapping up its intense phase of the war against Hamas, the focus, of course, is shifting north to Hezbollah. The Iranian-backed terror forces of Hezbollah have been launching attacks at Israel's northern border communities since October 8th in solidarity with Hamas. On Friday, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stressed, while Israel's not looking for war with Hezbollah and prefers a diplomatic solution to the threat on its northern border with Lebanon, it is prepared for the conflict if necessary. And he stated that. We are preparing the military force, and this can happen quickly. On the other hand, the political alternative is also being prepared. It's always better. And would to God that would be the case, but it just doesn't seem possible, knowing that who's controlling Hezbollah is Iran. Now, Hezbollah does not want to end its survival there, because that's what Israel could do. They could bomb them back into the Stone Age if they wanted to. And that's the worry. Will Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah there in Lebanon, allow that to happen? Because they have to know at the end of the day, they could do a lot of harm to Israel, an awful lot of harm, but they will be themselves basically destroyed, as we're seeing that happen with Hamas in Gaza, with its tunnels, with its weaponry, with its soldiers. So during this top-level meeting, we talked about this. Ben-Gvir reportedly equated Hamas with the Nazis and warned about any type of political deal with this terror group. would compromise Israel's security in the future. And he said, in other words, yeah, you can kick the can down the road, as Netanyahu did for years and years with Gaza, and look what we got ourselves into. You've got to deal with them now, because they're only going to get stronger. They're only going to get more weapons. Their tunnels are only going to get more, sophisticated. They're already more sophisticated than the ones in Gaza, their system there. And so you've got, deal with them while you can. So we'll see what happens. We just don't know. And so it's and Friday, Gallant addressed the evacuees, this 80,000 citizens of the north that are living elsewhere in Israel. He said, I know it's not easy for you and not easy for the residents of the north. There is one thing I can tell you, that is, it is much more difficult for Hezbollah and Lebanon. It's easy to speak from the bunker and make statements, Gallant said in a reference to Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. All right, so the way things stand now, it seems like a war is inevitable, as our next story illustrates. And this is headline 3 from Foreign Minister Israel Katz. He responds to the Iranian threat we heard today to destroy Israel. He posted on his X account, former Twitter, on late Saturday in response to Iran's threats to destroy Israel. Here's what he said. A regime that threatens destruction deserves to be destroyed. If Hezbollah does not cease its fire and withdraw from southern Lebanon, we will act against it with full force until security is restored and residents can return to their homes, Katz added. Now, it's really awful when circumstances come to this, but this is seemingly where it's at. So again, we'll stay tuned, we'll keep praying, and we'll bring you the latest when these events take place and see what occurs. Now we're going to shift gears with 2 stories about Vladimir Putin and Russia, and to put into perspective this whole Russian invasion that's going to happen at the time of the end, like we've talked about over and over again here on Breaking News, and the fact that it's not, the timing is not right now. It's not going to happen now or in the foreseeable future. And there's 2 stories that illustrate this. First, Putin again lists unrealistic conditions for peace in Ukraine. Remember, he put out these peace feelers, but they're listed there and they're just unrealistic. Basically, give the whole store up, Ukraine to Russia, whatever, agreements that have been made in the past, forget them. Wherever we're at right now, we're going to stop right here. Russia's going to be in charge of these areas that they've taken control over. Ukraine should not be part of NATO. Ukraine should not join any group, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's unrealistic. So the advisor to the head of the office of the president of Ukraine was quick to react to Putin's list of here's what they must do. There are no new peace proposals from Russia. Putin, the entity, has voiced only the standard aggressor set, which has been heard many times already. Its content is quite specific, highly offensive to international law, and speaks absolutely eloquently about the incapacity of the current Russian leadership to adequately assess realities. In other words, as one person said, as we mentioned before, this looks like a war that's, going on in perpetuity. There's no end to it, it seems. They're going to continue fighting. Putin gives these demands. We will have a ceasefire if you do A, B, C, and D, which means Ukraine give up everything, and the losses that they've incurred will go to Russia's benefit. And Ukraine says, no, we're not going to allow that. The West is still supporting Ukraine, the United States. And so we're seeing this is going to be something long term. Which brings us to headline number 5. To make matters worse, rumors swirl that North Korea is preparing to deploy troops to Ukraine. This comes from the Korean Central News Agency. Multiple outlets in Ukraine and South Korea reported this week that communist North Korea is preparing to send military engineers to aid the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Reports Pyongyang has not yet confirmed this at press time, but the Pentagon addressed the issue as concerning. The alarm regarding the potential presence of the North Korean armed forces in the Ukraine war theater follows a brief but consequential visit to Pyongyang by Russian strongman Vladimir Putin, who signed a mutual defense treaty with his counterpart, communist tyrant Little Rocket Man Kim Jong-un, that requires either country to act in the event that one of the parties is attacked. Concerns of a potential escalation in Ukraine fueled by North Korean soldiers remains present. However, especially in the light of past reports indicating that Russians have turned to deceiving young men from countries such as India and Cuba and forcing them to fight on front lines, the nature of this mutual defense treaty as well has caused alarm. And this is where we're at now. This is alarming to think that this might happen, that you'll have North Korean soldiers. I had a number of friends who fought in Vietnam, and they said by far the craziest soldiers out there were ones from North Korea that were there fighting on the side of the Vietnamese. They said these guys were absolutely nuts. And so this could add to Putin's arsenal of fighting Ukraine with North Korean soldiers. They've got this comprehensive partnership now they're working on, mutual assistance, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's remember something. North Korea is still technically at war with the United States. Did you know that? Since 1950, when the Korean War basically it never really ended with a peace agreement or formal surrender. It's just been a cessation of hostilities. That's why we have American troops right on the border there between North and South Korea, because officially we're still at war with North Korea. Now, why is this important? Okay, for our purposes, it continues to confirm that Putin is involved in an endless, seemingly endless war with Ukraine with Russia's military assets. This being the case, and please hear this, it is not possible for him to suddenly stop, withdraw his forces for an attack on Israel. The end of this war in Ukraine, this whole series of adventurism he's doing, is nowhere in sight. Furthermore, on the other hand, the 7 war fronts that Israel is now fighting have nothing to do with the predicted Ezekiel 38-39 invasion. Iran is listed in that passage of scripture as a surrogate, a subordinate of Russia. However, today Iran is behind all 7 war fronts against Israel. Now, as we have written, a number of things have to be in place for a literal fulfillment of Ezekiel 38-39 before this can occur, and none of them are in place right now. We document this in our book, 25 Signs. We're near the end. What about Iran's April 13-14 attack upon Israel? Could that be the beginning of Ezekiel 38-39? That is appendix number 5 in the book, and we talk about specifically 10 things that must be in place that aren't in place right now for the Ezekiel 38-39 scenario to take place. So the point is, why we mention these 2 Russian stories is again to remind you that this is not something that's immediately on the horizon. It will take place someday. It will definitely occur, but the circumstances now do not allow it to occur in the near future, and that's a given. All right, so to sum up, as of now, there are many questions with no immediate answers. The big question is what will happen, if anything, with the realization that the U.S. has no real leadership in the world. Will this cause Iran to hurry up and try further provocative measures against Israel as in April 13th and 14th? Well, in the meantime, we watch and pray. And also, hopefully, you're taking advantage of our resources. Again, our website, Educating Our World, everything is free there, 65 books for free download, 12 on Bible prophecy, where we go through our 25 signs. We're near the end. We talk about the rapture of the church, the final Antichrist, the Jews, Jerusalem, and the coming temple, et cetera, et cetera. It gives you a thorough explanation of what the Bible says is going to happen in the last days in our world. And so please take advantage of it. It's free and it's there for you to study, to know. So again, we don't want you to be affected by the 2Ds or infected by the 2Ds, which are discouragement and disillusionment. No, we don't want that to happen, because you don't need to be, because God has warned us about these things ahead of time. All right, I'm Don Stewart. We keep praying and we keep bringing you the latest here. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.